British man lands in Namibia, and within days, he's detained for abusing children. Douglas Robert Brook is facing 38 charges, including rape and child exploitation. Authorities say he lured over 30 children from the indigenous San community with sweets and cash, then photographed them naked and allegedly assaulted several. He had only been in the country for a week. Some of the images were found on his camera. Police seized it, bail was denied, and Namibia's Ministry of Environment and Tourism has condemned his actions as a violation of both children's rights and the cultural dignity of the San people. But this story doesn't end with one man's arrest. It opens the door to a much darker truth, one where Africa's most marginalized communities are still being preyed on by foreign men with power, money, and passports. In Kenya,
So British tourists arrested for taking nudes of Namibian children. This is a horrible story, and we are going to talk about it. But before we do, let's...
Looks like Joe got kicked off. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode
of This Week in Africa. Thank you, Gloria. Sorry about that. So yes, British tourists arrested for taking nudes of Namibian children. This is a horrendous story, and we are going to talk about it. So this is another episode of This Week in Africa, as Gloria began to say. And that is a collaborative effort between Authentic African, the platform, and Gloria Ayo, as we break down this week's breaking news and its impact on Pan-Africanism and Africa's independence. Today, we're going to dive into the controversy surrounding this British man, who he is, why he was arrested, and what he was doing in Namibia. But before we do, we like to start with some intros to get to know who we are before we get into the story. So I will turn it over to my co-host for an introduction before I introduce myself.
Hello, everybody. My name is Gloria Ayo. I am an African storyteller. I love to delve into African history, and on a platform like this one, I get to talk about current affairs that affect us. So it's always a pleasure being here. Thank you for having me again, Joe.
Absolutely. And thank you for being here. And I am Joe Hatagwa, the founder of AuthenticAfrican.com, an e-commerce platform that helps African artisans sell their products to the global diaspora. We sell handmade, ethically sourced products, that's carvings, instruments, all kinds of different things from the continent of Africa to the diaspora. And also I run Authentic African, the social media platforms where we connect Africans living on the continent and Africans of all sorts from around the diaspora, all with the ultimate goal of getting people to visit, invest, and move to and on the continent of Africa. So with that, let's get into the stories. So as we just teased, this 65-year-old British tourist identified as Douglas Robert Brook was arrested in Namibia on the 25th of May on serious charges related to sexual exploitation of children from the indigenous San community. The incident has sparked widespread outrage in Namibia and drawn international attention. So the key allegation in the events are as follows. So he was accused of instructing San children in the western area of Namibia to remove their clothes and photographing them while they were nude. He allegedly enticed the children, boys and girls, with money and sweets, that's like candies, in exchange for their compliance. So the Namibian police report that Brook inappropriately also touched the children with accusations, including things that I cannot say here, of teenagers between certain ages of like 14 and 16, boys and girls alike. So the police seized his camera, reportedly finding explicit images of the children. In total, Brook faces 38 charges, including the R word, indecent assault, and exploitation of children. So he was arrested on the 18th of May, and he had just entered the country on the 15th for a holiday. So he appeared before the court where he was denied bail and remained in custody pending further investigation. The case has been postponed to allow for additional police inquiries, and the British Embassy in Namibia acknowledged the incident and stated that they were aware of the media coverage. We just watched the video on it, so we're not going to play the video again, but Gloria, I'd love to get your thoughts on this before I give my thoughts on this particular story.
Thank you very much, Joe. And this is a very triggering story because the San people, who are also known as Bushmen, some of the oldest, or some would say they are the oldest continuous populations on Earth. They have DNA tracing back, some would say tens of thousands of years, whatever you believe in, but research will say they've been on Earth for at least a few thousand years. They're known to be hunter-gatherers across Namibia, Southern Africa, Botswana, Angola, South Africa. And this was all before the whole concept of colonial borders existed. Now, sadly, they have faced centuries of being excluded, being erased. Under German rule in what used to be called German Southwest Africa, today's Namibia, under German rule, they were violently displaced. And they did that because they wanted to make way for settler farms, and they were trying to run mining operations. So they displaced a lot of indigenous populations, including the San. Now, apartheid, as we know, was going on in neighboring South Africa, and obviously also in Southwest Africa, or German Southwest Africa, which is today's Namibia, and was also under the South African administration because the South Africans kicked out the Germans at some point, and then they brought apartheid to Namibia as well. Now, in all of this, the San were portrayed as primitive or as less evolved. As we know, this is a deeply racist notion. This is why the movie Gods Must Be Crazy. Funny movie, but is it really funny if you watch it again? Do you see what I'm saying? So portraying these people as, it's like the butt of a lot of jokes. And this portrayal of the San people has been used to justify land dispossession and forced assimilation. Now, at some point, they were relocated to Bushman camps. And because of that, they had to abandon their nomadic lifestyle in exchange for environments that seemed more controlled. And by doing that, their autonomy was severely restricted. After Namibia gained independence, they tried to restore dignity and cultural pride. They even had a museum, where these San people would give tourism. They had cultural tourism sites, and the San people would go there to showcase their traditions, earn money. They would educate tourists. And this right here, some people have seen as exploitative because it's like, okay, who are the people behind these projects? Who's making money from it? And some would say that the San do benefit from these efforts to an extent, but a lot of them still remain vulnerable due to poverty, due to low literacy rates, and they don't have any legal or institutional protection. Now, in a situation like this, where just imagine these people in a remote situation, economically desperate, loosely regulated, it's so easy to have a predatory actor like Douglas Robert Brook, allegedly taking advantage of that. And allegedly, this man, over time, sort of, warmed his way into this community. And he clearly was leveraging his foreign privilege, probably his resources, his money, to gain their trust. And this exploitation continued to where, there are people who objectify the San people, or really indigenous people throughout the world. And who knows the kind of audience he sells these photos to. But it's not even just him. This thing has been happening. And this is why I'm so impressed by the president of Namibia. A lot of things have been coming to light. He went there because it was probably a thing that was going on anyway. Because there have been incidents of SA and things like this where vulnerable indigenous populations are being exploited. So it's just all sad. It's just very tragic because, again, it's colonial era pseudoscience where people such as the San people are being studied, they're photographed, and then they're displayed by anthropologists and museums in Europe, and dare I say exhibitionists or people who have some kind of weird fetish.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, you said it all. And I think one of the other things that I'll mention is, even when we're not talking about the Sand people, but just in general, the European travelers who come to the continent of Africa, many of which who come through their working at NGOs, working at nonprofits, you'll find I have an anecdotal story of a gentleman who worked at an NGO of friends of mine who was known as someone who dated people as young as 14, right? And their families would allow it because he would come in kind of promising to take care of the families, and they saw it as a potential opportunity to lift themselves out of poverty. And so, as you mentioned, this can be very exploitative. And so I think what we can do is play the rest of this video because I think it gives more context for the broader issues happening on the continent with folks like Brook. And then we'll close out this particular section. But I think it might be important for people to kind of hear more about how this is a wider problem across the continent, not just in Namibia, but anywhere you might go on the continent, you might see this. So I'll play the rest of this video and then we'll have some more commentary afterwards.
Yeah, authorities have been grappling with the same issue. In 2019 alone, the country's anti-human trafficking unit rescued 230 children from both local and international abusers. The cases often follow a similar script. Older white men arrive with offers of help, education, food, opportunities. Families, often living in poverty, accept. Then the abuse begins. In one case, an American missionary named Gregory Daw was convicted for sexually abusing girls at an orphanage he ran in Kenya. A German national was charged with trafficking and child pornography. Some perpetrators even live-stream abuse to international audiences, using cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin for payments. Kenya's coastline has become a hotspot, especially after parts of Southeast Asia crack down on sex tourism. Locals known as beach traders sometimes act as intermediaries, offering tourists more than just massages or safaris. In communities where poverty is high, these acts are sometimes overlooked in exchange for money or gifts. Efforts to stop this trend exist. Kenya receives alerts from international agencies like the NCMEC. It is also building AI tools to sort digital abuse reports faster. But most African countries don't have those systems in place. And until they do, and until this issue is treated with the seriousness it demands, stories like the one in Namibia will keep happening.
Yeah, shout out to the page who put this story together. I think it's really important to add that additional context because, obviously it seems like an isolated incident. Obviously it's horrendous and horrific, all the words that you can use to describe it, but it is not new and it's not exclusive to Namibia. And so we just wanted to make sure that we gave you that additional context so you guys are aware of this. And you'll notice this when you go, especially, many of the people who watch this go to West Africa a ton. And you'll see this. I see this a lot in Sierra Leone. It's a little bit more out there in the open, in terms of what we're talking about on the beach here, or even just people around. There are like specific nightclubs and places where that's where people are going to change their lives. And these guys are really here for that. They might seem like they're in the country that they're in for a noble cause, for an NGO or for a nonprofit, but really they're using that to satiate their appetite for young or vulnerable people on the continent. And so, obviously this is it's something that needs to be, corrected, and people need to be persecuted for this or prosecuted for this. And so I'm glad this gentleman here was caught and immediately, put in jail for the alleged. If there's evidence, there's evidence. But there just needs to be more of it, because this is not the only incident, and it won't be the only incident that happens on the continent. And so, as you mentioned, to kind of bring it back to the new president, this is something that she talked about a lot, right? Was clamping down on these things. And so, as you mentioned, Gloria, it seems as though she's now making true on that promise that she made.
Mm-hmm. Yes, she absolutely is. And that's one prop I will keep giving the president of Namibia, President Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa. No, Ndaitwa. I'm sorry, Namibians, bear with me. It's quite a tongue twister. Netumbo Nandi Ndaitwa. That's something I would give her props for, just the initiative she's been taking. And it's so wonderful to have a woman who's only one of 2 female presidents on the continent doing the kind of work she's been doing. Very impressive. Hello, Awele O. You wrote, hello, Joe and Gloria from the UK. And guys, feel free to share your thoughts. We like to make this as engaging and interactive as possible. So reading your comments just help us keep going. Give us the feedback, constructive, appreciative, whatever it is you have. And if you'd like to add to the conversations we're having, we would love to read from you. So drop the comments and we will take them. But yeah, so as I was saying, regarding this thing going on in Namibia, it's just very unfortunate how, it's such a, it's a really crazy time to be African, with all the racism that we're seeing just being spewed everywhere. And it's also a great time to be African, because I've seen more African unity than I ever have, at least on the internet. And of course, digitally, a lot of improvements have been made to where it feels like not just even Africans, people of African descent throughout the world, you can see that unity on the internet. And that's a very wonderful thing to be a part of. And it's just so ironic that while we're being more conscious of racism, on the other hand, you have racist people objectifying Africans. You know what I mean? It's like, what do you want from us? Why would you take a community of people and disrespect them in that way? Why would you do that? And that's why I'm very glad we're actually sharing this story. As much as we're giving the president all the props and kudos for ensuring that these kinds of stories come to light, the Ministry of Environment, I think Forestry and Tourism in Namibia, they have also condemned the actions, and we just need them to be more on guard with things like this, so that, first of all, there have to be child protection laws, because that was a serious violation. That man knows he can't try that in his country. Then you come to our continent and you think you can just go crazy with a camera. But they have to put those laws in place. Civil society organizations have to ensure that things like this do not keep happening. And people need to be educated. The San community too, they should, but you can empower them by also making them informed, because they are intelligent to know, right? They should know where the boundaries are. Don't allow anybody come here or some tourists come in to take advantage of you. So it's just those things that I do believe Namibia can put in place, and that should be very helpful. I don't want to go to the next story without Joe, but I want to use this opportunity to talk about something that happened yesterday, still speaking of Namibia. So yesterday, I don't know if you guys have ever heard of the Herero Nama genocide. My goodness. You see, I did a post on my page today. I haven't posted it on YouTube yet. I posted it on Instagram, on TikTok. And it was actually repurposed a post from last year. Sometime in October 1904, the Herero Nama genocide started. And now that Joe is back, I will save the tea. Oh, it's not tea. There's nothing. It's a. I don't know if you all have these herbs you drink where you come from, because in Nigeria we have this thing we call agbo. Agbo is nasty, but it's supposed to be good medicine. It's great medicine for your body. So this is not tea. This is agbo. It's disgusting. But I'll save that for when we get to that. Welcome back, Joe.
Thank you. Apologies, my internet went out, and I'm still trying to figure out how to get back online on all platforms and across all devices. So, so I think where I last left off, I had mentioned that she was living up to her promise, and it sounds like I imagine you went through that, right?
Yes.
So now with that, as you mentioned, you were impressed by what she's been up to, and it does feel like she is now continuing to follow through on what she had said. Why that's important is many people around the world feel disenfranchised, and they feel like their leaders do not do what they say, especially on the continent. You hear this all the time, empty promises. And the one person that people have been looking to on the continent is Ibrahim Traore, obviously Goita, and the president of Niger have also been making major strides. Some people feel happy about what's happening here in Ghana as well. And so, to hear what's happening in Namibia, I think that she's on the right path. And with that, there was a serious meeting between a groundbreaking meeting, actually. So Africa's only two female presidents from Namibia and Tanzania met to forge a new future for the continent. So in this groundbreaking meeting, Tanzania's president and Namibia's president, the only two female heads of state in Africa, have officially met to strengthen bilateral ties and champion a new era in women-led governance on the continent. Their meeting focused on expanding cooperation in education, healthcare, trade, sustainability, and promoting regional integration and development. They also were looking at elevating the role of women in leadership and governments, and sending a strong signal to Africa's future is one of inclusion, equality, equity, and progress. Now, we can at least say that for Namibia. I think that we have some criticisms for Tanzania, which we'll get to. But let's talk a little. Let's play a video, and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Powerful moment for Africa. The continent's only two female presidents stood side by side, not just as heads of state, but as symbols of transformation. President Samia Suluhu Hassan of Tanzania and President Netumbo Nandi-Ndaitwah of Namibia met to strengthen diplomatic ties and to send a bold message about women in leadership. President Hassan, Tanzania's first female leader, has long championed development, gender equity, and regional cooperation. President Nandi-Ndaitwah, who just made history in 2025 as Namibia's first woman to hold the top office, brings decades of political experience and a firm commitment to climate action and good governance. Their meeting focused on collaboration in education, health, trade, and more, but it also signaled something deeper, a united front in uplifting African women, empowering communities, and reshaping the future of the continent. Two nations, two visionary leaders, one shared purpose, progress through inclusion.
Okay, it looks like we lost Joe again. But yeah, let me tell you more about the Herero Nama genocide, which actually happened in Namibia. It started sometime in October 1904. And between 1904 and I think 1908, the genocide continued. Or I think it was 1907, because on May 28, 1907, German authorities insisted that the concentration camps that had been set up to get rid of people, there was this, the Germans had colonized Namibia, and two tribes stood up to them. Two ethnic groups fought the Germans, the Herero tribe and the Nama tribe. And what the colonialists decided to do was to punish them by exterminating them, getting them exterminated. And those who didn't die, they threw into concentration camps. So this actually affected their population. I think it was 80% of the Herero tribe and 50% of the Nama tribe. Forgive me if I'm mixing the figures up. But a huge chunk of their populations were killed because of this. I mean, in the Kalahari deserts, imagine having people in that scorching heat, children, mothers, fathers, it was just horrific what they did. And it was hundreds of, about, I think at least 100,000 of them that were killed. And what President Ndaitwa is doing is commendable, because this is actually the very first official Remembrance Day, and they had that yesterday, to actually commemorate the mass killings of the Herero and Nama peoples by German colonial forces. So yeah, but it was officially in 1907 they ended it. Well, I think it still kind of went on until 1908, but it was about 4 years, and it was just very sad. So having her doing, seeing that she's doing things like this is extremely wonderful for the continent. And she's also big on reparations. She's been telling Germany, because they committed to paying about $1 billion, even though descendants of the victims of that genocide are saying they need more money, that they need more than that. That $1 billion cannot cover the atrocity of the Germans, from back in the day. But Germany has been, at least to the best of my knowledge, they've been trying to be accountable for it. But that's just, yet another horrible story when we talk about African history. All right. Farquhar Ali wrote, in Namibia, yes, Germany, colonizers. Oh yeah, you're familiar with the story. And if anybody wants more details on that, please feel free to go on my page. I'll be more than happy to, or rather, you can go on there and just, sorry, I'm trying to read a message from Joe. Okay, his internet ran out, but we'll just wait. But yeah, I'll be more than happy to give you more details. All you have to do is, I am more than happy to share details. Just go on my page, the Gloria Ayo on Instagram, and you can see that particular history. I literally posted it today to celebrate, the fact that they had a Remembrance Day. But I had done the video last year, and that was a story that many people did not even know about. So it's our job to tell our stories. If we don't tell our stories, somebody will tell them for us, and we won't like that version. No, we won't. Farquhar Ali, you're talking about a book, Unburied, Unmarked, The Untold Namibian Story of the Genocide. Oh, 1904 to 1908. Yep, by Jephthah Ungu Herimo. Okay, well, thank you for sharing that. You seem to read a lot of books. I think you've also made recommendations on this platform to people of books they can read. That's a great thing. That's a very, very good habit to form. So thank you for sharing. So yeah, that's what happened. And President Ndaitwa ensured that there was a commemoration to mark that day. I was talking about the Herero Nama genocide. Welcome back.
Thank you for that. Yes, I'm back. Guys, I really apologize. For whatever reason, every single network connection that I have is going out. I am in Ghana right now. And I have a backup to a backup to a backup, and all of which were not connecting to the internet. So apologies for that. And I see a number of comments that were coming in on Instagram that I was not able to get to. But I see people saying wonderful for African continent to reunite, to unite together to build strong nations. Somebody asked to write the book name, which it was done. I think you shared it. The book name was here. It's on the screen here. That's the book name that somebody was asking for. Yeah, a bunch of people were just responding to the history that you were just giving. So apologies, guys. I can't control the internet here. If I could, I would, but I can't, so I don't. So we just talked about obviously there's two. So I'll just add one piece here. I think Tanzania's president could learn from what's happening in Namibia, right? It seems like she's forging her own path. She's living up to the promises that she's made, and she doesn't seem to be, at least publicly and at least in terms of some of the more egregious errors that the previous administrations have made, she doesn't seem to be as following through with some of the old world order that was in place prior to her coming on board. I will say contextually, one of the reasons why you might see that happening in Tanzania is because she has been in politics for a while, right? So this is not a new person. She's been there before. And if I'm not mistaken, she had actually taken over after a previous president had passed from COVID, if I'm not mistaken. So, you know, that obviously she comes with a historical lens to the country and is going to operate a lot like people who came before her. So although it's a new face, it is still the same politics in that country. But, you know, I think a lot of us can learn from other people, and, you know, you're the combined average of the 5 people you hang around most. So if she's spending more time with Namibia's president, maybe she'll make some changes. All right. So with that, we're going to shift gears here, and hopefully you guys are still going to be able to hear me and see me through the rest of this, because I apologize again, the internet's been going in and out. But we're going to move to some of the rest of the topics of the week. So we're shifting from Namibia to South Sudan, where U.S. officials plan to send migrants to South Sudan. So we've now had this conversation on a number of occasions, and we are back at this again, but now it's with South Sudan. So we talked last week about the potential for Palestinians to be sent to Libya. We talked about Rwanda potentially taking migrants. Now it's looking like South Sudan has been added to the list of countries in which you know, the Trump administration would like to send migrants to. So luckily, a federal judge has ruled that U.S. officials must retain custody and control of migrants removed to South Sudan. A federal judge ruled on last Wednesday that the U.S. government violated his court order by attempting to deport migrants to South Sudan, opening another front in the battle between Donald Trump and judges who have imposed checks on the Republican president's hardline immigration policy. The U.S. District Judge Brian Murphy said U.S. officials risked being held in contempt of court for violating a primary injunction he issued in April to block the administration from sending deportees to countries other than their own without the opportunity to raise any concerns they had for their safety. So let's go to a video, and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
This morning, a federal judge is ordering the Trump administration to maintain custody of deportees allegedly being sent to countries they are not from, including war-torn South Sudan. Judge Brian Murphy, a Biden appointee, saying it's to ensure the practical feasibility of return if the court finds that such removals were unlawful. The New York Times reports the judge pressed the administration in a hearing on whether migrants were being deported to South Sudan without due process, which would violate an order issued in April. That order directed the administration to give migrants 15 days notice to raise concerns about potential danger before deporting them to countries other than their own. Lawyers say at least 12 men were deported to South Sudan.
This is being done by our government to cause the immigrant community and, quite frankly, everyone in this country to be afraid.
When pressed about the whereabouts of one deportation plane, the Times reports the Justice Department's lawyer responded, "I'm told that that information is classified, and I am told that the final destination is also classified," insisting they violated no orders because no concern about danger was raised. The legal battle comes hours after Homeland Security Chief Kristi Noem got into a heated exchange on Capitol Hill about habeas corpus, the constitutional right to challenge an arrest or imprisonment.
Well, habeas corpus is a constitutional right that the president has to be able to remove people from this country and suspend their right to.
Let me stop you, ma'am. Habeas corpus, excuse me, that's incorrect.
President Lincoln used it.
Excuse me. Habeas corpus is the legal principle that requires that the government provide a public reason for detaining and imprisoning people. If not for that protection, the government could simply arrest people, including American citizens, and hold them indefinitely for no reason.
The administration has argued President Trump has the right to suspend habeas corpus because we're in a time of invasion. As for those deportations to South Sudan, a court hearing is scheduled in Boston this morning. Lionel Moise, ABC News, New York.
Gloria, your thoughts, please.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. We talked about South Sudan. We've talked about South Sudan a couple of times being on the edge, and the hope is that that doesn't even ever happen. They found yet another country. We talked about Libya with the Palestinian case, even though the Libyan government denied that, or them saying, the allegations or reports of the American government trying to send Palestinians to Libya. And we know Libya is a war-torn country. And South Sudan is, even though it's the newest country on earth, is facing a lot of challenges, including civil conflict, including political instability, humanitarian crisis. And I mean, to have a significant source of refugees, that's what South Sudan has become. It's very unfortunate. Nearly 2.4 million South Sudanese have been displaced. So for you to think that South Sudan is a great idea to dump people, it shows you don't even see the value of people, of Black and brown people. Because why would you even think that was a great idea? Were you going to just offer money or some kind of aid and yet again dump people to some random African country? Historically, South Sudan has not been a destination for migrants from outside the African continent. So these deportations are marking a departure from this pattern. And South Sudanese officials, thankfully, have been resisting this. They denied receiving the deportees. They've expressed their concerns over the implications of such an action. And it's just showing the complexities when it comes to international deportation policies, especially when it involves third countries that are not directly connected to the people being deported. And it's showing how, it's the importance of people sticking to legal procedures and just being respectful of sovereignty and even the capacity of nations like South Sudan. They have their own internal challenges going on. Let's put some respect on African countries. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I'll just add, look, there's a couple things that I see as a pattern here. One, their thought process is if a group of people looks like the group of people that they're trying to send to somewhere else, that's what they're going to do. They think Palestinians and Libyans kind of look alike, so let's send Palestinians to Libya. They think that Venezuelans and Nicaraguans and all of them look alike, so we'll just send them all to one country. We'll send them to El Salvador. They think that, any Black or African or anyone of Caribbean descent, they'll just send them to South Sudan or Rwanda or anywhere where they think the people look like them, right? It's basically the policy of the administration to send people to countries where they think, well, they kind of look alike, so we should just send them all there. It's the idea they all look alike thing. And then on top of that, too, generally deportations happen to the country of origin, right? That's generally how deportations happen. Now, if we're talking about in criminal cases, it still happens that way. And the country of origin then deals with those people and, either puts them in jail or their own version, or they deal with them in other ways, right? In this case, we're talking about sending people to another country, as you said, a third-party country. Makes absolutely no sense. There's no rhyme or reason. Judges are blocking it, yet they're still proceeding to attempt to do it anyway. And I think this speaks to a larger issue just around how, as you said, there's no respect put on Africa's name, right? Like in no other places around or Latin America as well, but no other places around the world are they just saying like, we'll just give you some money and we're just going to send some migrants your way. They're not doing it in Europe. They're not doing it in the Middle East. They're not doing it in Asia. They're doing it in Africa and they're doing it in Latin America. And that speaks to how the United States sees these continents and the countries within those continents. So yeah, I think this is a problem, but you know, of course, it's an ongoing one, and we'll just continue to keep you guys updated as these stories come along. You know, our job is to comment on the news and you know, share with you guys what's going on, and continue to keep you guys aware of how the U.S. and Africa are relations are either souring or changing over time. With that, I think we can move on to Sudan. So, not to be confused with South Sudan, where we were just talking about. We're moving to Sudan. The U.S. is potentially going to impose sanctions on Sudan after the U.S. government has accused Sudanese government of using chemical weapons. So the United States said last Thursday it would impose sanctions on Sudan after it determined that the government used chemical weapons in 2024 during the army's conflict with a paramilitary rapid support forces, a charge, of course, the army denied. Measures against Sudan will include limits to U.S. exports and U.S. government lines of credit, and will take effect June 6th, after Congress was notified on last Thursday. So the State Department spokesperson, Tammy Bruce, has actually confirmed this. And what they said was the United States calls on the government of Sudan to cease all chemical weapons use and uphold its obligations under the CWC, Bruce said, referring to the Chemical Weapons Convention treaty banning the use of such weapons. In a statement, Sudan rejected the move and described the allegations as false. Sudan's response read, this interference, which lacks any moral or legal basis, deprives Washington of what is left of its credibility and closes the door to any influence in Sudan. And that's what the government spokesperson, Khalid Al-Isir, said on Friday. So we're going to go to this video, and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Well, the United States has announced sanctions against Sudan, accusing its military of using chemical weapons in its ongoing conflict with the paramilitary rapid support forces. The sanctions that are set to take effect from the 6th of June will include restrictions on U.S. exports to Sudan and also a suspension of U.S. government-backed credit lines. The move follows a formal determination by the U.S. government and notification to the Congress. The State Department spokesperson Tammy Bruce has said that the United States calls on the government of Sudan to cease all chemical weapons use and to uphold its obligations under the Chemical Weapons Convention. In a swift response, Sudan's government has rejected the accusations and has called them to be false, politically motivated, and also a baseless interference that undermines U.S. credibility and influence in the region. The government spokesperson Khalid Al-Isir stated that this interference deprives Washington of what is left of its credibility. Now, the war in Sudan erupted in April 2023, stemming from a bitter power struggle between the army and the RSF. And since then, it has spiraled into one of the world's worst humanitarian crises, with tens of thousands of people being killed and over 13 million people getting displaced. A large part of the country is also facing famine-like conditions, while reports of ethnic violence and war crimes have drawn condemnation from the international community.
All right. So what are your thoughts on the sanctions and the accusation of Sudan and the use of chemical weapons?
Yeah, and I was going to add to the South Sudan story. Sorry to take us back. I was going to add that
sure.
What makes it very interesting also is that the people that were reported to be, or the deportees to South Sudan, are supposed to be Southeast Asian.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that was very good. All kinds of things are just going on, man. 2025 has been a very interesting year so far. I don't know about you guys, but anyway. But now to the Sudan story. And in case anybody's wondering why the United States is once again having this power, like what gives them the legal authority to try to sanction any country? Like what is their business with Sudan? Now, there are laws like the IEEPA, the International Emergency Economic Powers Act, that allow the president to regulate commerce in response to anything they deem to be unusual or some sort of extraordinary threat to national security, foreign policy, or the economy. Under the IEEPA, the Treasury Department's Office of Foreign Assets Control issues sanctions that target people. It could be companies. It could actually even be entire governments. So Sudan has been sanctioned under various regimes since the 1990s. This is not new for Sudan. Originally for harboring terrorists like Osama bin Laden, and even for atrocities in Darfur. So beyond domestic law, America's influence over the global financial system gives it a lot of leverage, because most international trade and transactions are routed through the US dollar and processed via American banks or institutions with US ties. The US can actually block access to financial systems for those it sanctions. So what this does is it creates ripple effects, even for non-American entities, banks, companies, governments. They have to comply with US sanctions to avoid being locked out of global markets. And sometimes people will call this the long arm jurisdiction of US sanctions. Now, as for Sudan specifically, the US government justifies sanctions based on Sudan's alleged use of chemical weapons. And this is them likely citing violations of international law, such as the Chemical Weapons Convention, to which Sudan is a party. And although Sudan has denied the use of chemical weapons in past conflicts like Darfur, which I just mentioned, accusations have resurfaced, because of the current civil war that's happening between the SAF, the Sudanese Armed Forces, and the RSF, the Rapid Support Forces. And if these allegations are credible and tied to state actors, the US is framing it as both humanitarian crisis and a threat to international norms. So further sanctions have to be imposed because of this. Now, historically, the US has used sanctions as a tool of foreign policy enforcement. In Iraq, during Saddam Hussein's regime, for alleged chemical weapons use and human rights abuses. In Syria, following the Assad regime's use of sarin and chlorine gas. In Libya under Gaddafi, in response to terrorism and alleged weapons programs. And so that we don't think it's just Africa, well, I've referenced Syria and Iraq, but even recently, places like Russia, Venezuela, Iran, North Korea, the US will come for you, because sanctions are a regular instrument when it comes to US diplomacy. It's not just Africa. But yeah, so what is going on in Sudan, that threat to them would have a lot of repercussions. Like, you don't want to play with America when it comes to this. And in 1998, the US, again, in Sudan, they bombed the Al-Shifa pharmaceutical factory in Khartoum. They had alleged that it was producing chemical weapons and had ties to terrorist groups. These claims were later disputed. The bombing actually drew a lot of international criticism. And this is kind of mirroring that a little bit, especially because of the heightened tensions between Sudan and the UAE, with Sudan accusing the UAE of supporting the RSF. So it's a lot going on. The use of chemical weapons is a serious violation of international law, and it has a lot of humanitarian implications should they be found guilty. But we'll keep monitoring that.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, and look, as you mentioned, it's been a tool that's been used to try to keep countries in check. And just to kind of give people a little bit of a concept of what sanctions mean. So generally, United States is one of the biggest trade partners for many different countries around the world, right? So when they cut off trade, for example, there was a trade embargo with Cuba for like 60 years. And so if you see many cars in Cuba are like these really old school cars from that time. And Cuba had a lot of challenges doing business internationally, because when the US sanctions you, the US's allies are also meant to follow those sanctions as well, right? And so they tend to not do business with you. They try to ice you out of the global trade, right? And so when the US, so that was why when we spoke a couple of weeks ago about how Mali had been able to survive sanctions that had been put on them and became one of the fastest growing economies in the world. And that's what Ibrahim Traore was mentioning when he was at the first international AES summit. He was applauding them for that. He also applauded Russia for being able to continue to operate outside of the sanctions as well. It is a very difficult thing to do, but if you can figure it out, it makes you less dependent on the West. And so, we want to see an independent Africa. And so I think if we see more of these sanctions and things like this continue to happen, hopefully we see Africa become more independent. But in this case, if chemical weapons are being used, obviously that's something that we would like to see curbed and curtailed and eliminated completely. Because although, it's war and there's expectation that people are going to experience loss of life, using chemical warfare in that way, I think is against all kinds of accords that we have and we've agreed upon internationally. So, we'd love to see that stop immediately if that is the true case. But as you said, there are a lot of questions about whether or not the United States has a leg to stand on, and as it pertains to anything to do with making other people stop doing anything when they selectively decide who they add sanctions to for violating international laws around war, right? Specifically, we see this happening in countries that will remain nameless here because it doesn't have anything to do with Africa, but the United States does pick and choose where they decide they want to focus their efforts. Okay, so now shifting gears from South Sudan and Sudan, the Chagos Islands in Mauritius. So the UK will hand over those islands to Mauritius in a deal, it says, protects a U.S. base. Again, it's all about U.S. interests. So the United Kingdom has signed a deal to hand over sovereignty of the Chagos Islands, a remote island in the Indian Ocean, to Mauritius. The move, which has the backing of Donald Trump, is designed to secure a future of a critical U.S.-UK joint military base on the island. But obviously critics of Britain think it's a costly mistake. So let's go to a video now and we'll give some commentary on the other side.
Amid the debate as to who should own the Chagos Islands, the people who were forcibly removed from the archipelago by the British government more than 50 years ago have felt ignored. Two Chagosian women launched an 11th-hour bid to block the handover. It delayed the signing of the agreement, but ultimately failed.
We don't want to hand over our rights to Mauritius. We're not Mauritians.
For them, this deal is personal, about identity and history. But for the British government, it's about security.
This is absolutely vital for our defence and intelligence, and therefore for the safety and security of the British people.
The islands, located almost 10,000 kilometres from the UK, were purchased by Britain in 1965 when they were separated from Mauritius and became formally known as the British Indian Ocean Territory. The largest island, Diego Garcia, is home to a British-American military base, from where operations across the Middle East are launched and global surveillance is conducted. The UK has been under increasing pressure to hand the territory to Mauritius after the UN's top court backed its sovereignty claim. Threatened with the loss of a key airbase, London negotiated this agreement that will see Diego Garcia leased back to Britain for 99 years, with the option of a 50-year extension, at an average cost of around 211 million Australian dollars a year. The UK government insists this deal is absolutely necessary because impending legal challenges could have made the military base unworkable, with the ability to fly in and out restricted and satellite communications threatened.
No action was no option, and anyone who would argue to abandon this deal would abandon this base.
I think we get the point there. For an island or a group of islands so far away from the continent, in the Indian Ocean, I'd love to hear from you about handing it over with basically at least with the option to buy, I guess, or the option to buy back. What are your thoughts here on this continued colonization and changeover in leadership to a country that's meant to be its own sovereign state?
Yes. Now, the Chagos Island, was uninhabited until the late 18th century, when the French established coconut plantations using enslaved labor. And in 1814, the British took control of the islands, administering them as part of Mauritius. And in 1965, 3 years before Mauritius gained independence, the UK decided to separate the Chagos Islands to form the British Indian Ocean Territory. And in doing that, they were able to facilitate the establishment of a US military base on Diego Garcia. This led to the removal of approximately 2,000 Chagosians between 1967 and 1973, and they were relocated to Mauritius, Seychelles, and the UK. Now, of course, the UK's actions have gained a lot of criticism. In 2019, the ICJ issued an advisory opinion stating that the UK's continued administration of the Chagos Island was unlawful, and that the decolonization of Mauritius was incomplete without the return of the islands. So the United Nations General Assembly subsequently passed a resolution demanding that the UK's withdrawal from the territory be done. Now, this recent agreement includes provisions for the UK, as was pointed out, to pay Mauritius approximately £101 million annually for the lease of Diego Garcia. While this deal is allowing for the potential resettlements of the Chagosians, who have been speaking about this for years, I've been following this story for years, it is excluding Diego Garcia from resettlement plans. The exclusion, of course, again, is drawing criticism because these people have been displaced. And it's once again another story when we talk about how Africans, they don't care about your culture, they don't care about your tribe or your ethnicity. They don't care about your language, your food. They just come in, take what they want to take, divide what they want to divide. And it's 2025, and there are people still protesting because you just displaced people for no reason. Imagine just going through life not knowing where you really belong, or you know where you belong, but they deny that to you. So,
right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think you said it all, and yeah, I think that background and history of the island and the relationships to the UK, I think are really important because I think it helps give context to what's actually happening right now and why it's happening and why people are opposing it, right? Yes. So yeah, I appreciate that because I'm learning as we go along the history of places like this. And, what I would say, I mean, I don't have much to add except that, we still are pawns in the West game, West and the East, right? I mean, they're always just playing us against each other, making decisions about our people and islands and land. And there isn't autonomy at this point in time, and there isn't much respect for Africa. And we keep talking about that. It keeps coming up because, it's going to take strong leadership to be able to change that, and we're seeing it in the AES, as we mentioned before, and maybe we're seeing it in some other places. And so we hope that continues and that takes shape around the rest of the continent so that no longer will countries be, or entire populations be moved and or reassigned or whatever you would describe this as when they have their own national identity. Any other thoughts on this story before we move on?
That will be all from me for now. Thank you.
Okay, great. So with that, we will move on to the last major headline, and that is moving on to Uganda, pushing for military courts to try civilians. Now, this is dangerous. Uganda's parliament has passed a law that permits civilians to be tried in military courts. The decision has sparked protests from opposition lawmakers, of course. The government claims that the law is essential for national security. However, critics worry that it could be used to suppress dissent and the lead up to the next year's general election. Let's play a video and then we'll have some commentary on the other side.
Parliament has passed a controversial law allowing military courts to once again try civilians, a move that has sparked outrage among opposition leaders and rights groups. This comes despite a Supreme Court ruling in January that banned such prosecutions, citing lack of legal competence and fairness. Opposition MPs condemned the new law as unconstitutional and shallow, accusing the government of attempting to muzzle dissent. The military, however, praised the law for strengthening national security and deterring militant political movements. Military spokesman Chris Magezi defended the legislation, stating it would counter armed criminal activity and safeguard democratic processes. Muhoozi Kainerugaba, the president's son and head of the armed forces, hailed parliamentarians as fearless patriots. The law now awaits President Yoweri Museveni's signature to take effect. In recent years, prominent opposition figures like Kizza Besigye and Bobi Wine have faced charges in military courts, proceedings critics say were politically motivated. Human Rights Watch has denounced Uganda's military tribunals for relying on torture-tainted evidence and failing to meet global standards of judicial independence. The military has denied these allegations.
Those are some tough allegations. You know, they said, what was it? Torture, muddied allegations or whatever they said, you know, confessions, etc. Yeah, I mean, look, I'd love to get your thoughts on this before I give my thoughts, because I have some thoughts on this one as well.
Yeah, just listening to the video just makes me think of the importance of parenting. I know, because you can teach your child to be racist, apparently. You can teach your child to be a dictator. This Museveni's son is the same man we spoke about a few weeks ago, and I haven't seen any update on the story. I wonder what happened to the bodyguard. But to brag about or kidnapping Bobi Wine's bodyguard openly without any care, you know, it's what they've been doing. I mean, I don't know if you saw the video of Museveni recently sitting with his wife and appealing to the people and apologizing for anything they may have done wrong because they're trying to run for presidency yet again.
Right.
It's like, who do you think you're leading? You really, or should I say ruling? Who do you think you're ruling? You have people who are more enlightened than you know, and it's just so unfortunate that this has become the narrative, the story for Uganda, and it's just a way to get rid of people. It's just a way to unalive people, because if you're going military, that's extreme. And Uganda has been struggling with this issue of trying civilians in military courts. In 2006, the Constitutional Court ruled that these practices were unlawful, but despite whatever the court says, they're going to do it anyway.
Right.
Just in January, the Supreme Court said it was unconstitutional, and here we are. So the man is bigger than the law, Museveni.
Right, absolutely. And as you mentioned, Bobi Wine, a very popular political figure, opposition to the president, has fallen victim to this very thing, as was mentioned in the video. Yeah, I mean, it's you know, I think in some cases military rule might make sense if it's a bridge to democracy and it's people who are focused on building the country and taking it forward. I think it's a little scary when you don't have checks and balances in place, right? There is no, I think in this video it mentioned that, you know, there's kind of no third party to be overseeing what they do in these trials and how they try people and what sentences that they give in and all of those kinds of things. And so, you know, and Obsidian makes a point that, well, Bobi Wine is the front runner opposition leader to unseat President Museveni and thus ending the succession from Muhoozi. So I think the challenge there is if he doesn't get locked up.
You see that comment that he also added?
Yes.
It's the pattern. Tundu Lissu is the same thing. You have foreign people sponsoring them. If you don't have tangible proof, not you, Obsidian, because this is your feedback and I appreciate you sharing it. If you don't have tangible proof that these people are indeed being sponsored by foreign people, Let's sit it out, because that's the easy way to get Africans to move on. And even if that is the case, you don't legally, you still don't go about it the way you do. We need tangible proof, because that's what they keep using to stifle resistance and opposition. Every opposition voice throughout the continent, most opposition voices get threatened throughout the continent. So I get your point, but like, as you said, it's rumored. Where's the proof? Because if there is proof, then that's a problem. But you want to say there's foreign, you're not even a great leader to begin with. Oops, no disrespect to my Ugandan people. I say he's not a great leader by virtue of him being in power since the early 80s. It is time for that man to go. Do you see him sleeping? Like he goes to functions and is knocked out. Take a rest, daddy. Go sleep, grandpa. Just take a break. I assume he has grandchildren, and I say that with all due respect. Child, these people are a mess. I'm sorry.
Yes. And the real source says President Museveni and his wife recent public apology may have been funny if the issues were not so serious. Agreed. Yeah, I mean, look, it doesn't seem like he is fit to be president. I'll say that. From all of what I've been seeing, he had a few viral moments last year where they refused World Bank money, or maybe it was the year before, and he said, "We don't need your World Bank money," et cetera, and people applauded him for that. But they weren't really aware of who the person was. They just saw, the policies of the World Bank and what they're requiring countries to do, and they're saying we don't want Africans to do that, et cetera. And so I think people were applauding him, but I think they may not have been applauding him so loudly had they known much of what he's been doing to dissenters. Farquan says, President Museveni knows that the military ruling is 1,000% unlawful and must always be separate from civil society. Court needs a lawful National Guard. There it is. All good points. So I have nothing else to add here. We do have some stories from around the continent that we do want to cover as well. There's a couple of different things that we wanted to cover off on, and we wanted to make sure that you guys were aware of them and that you should be paying attention to. So first of which is Malema's response to Trump. Any high level context you want to give there for folks who are listening at home and want to do some research on this particular story?
Man, I love me some Malema, man. People will come with, he's a communist and he's a troublemaker and he's saying they should, unalive people or whatnot. I commend him he represents boldness. Right. And this is why people like Ibrahim Traore, regardless of whether or not you're for or against the military style of leading or ruling, the fact that these people, because we're not used to having leaders who are so bold. And this is why even Zimbabwe, Mugabe, this is why people would think about Mugabe and praise him, because he stood in certain regards, he stood up to the West. So having a Malema who's not even president, just being so bold and very hilarious, if you ask me. I don't know if you heard some of his responses. That man is something else. But it's that boldness. His words might be controversial, but the energy is what we have been deprived of. It's what we're all craving from our leaders. And that's why Ibrahim Traore is getting all the praise he's getting. So Malema has become a global sensation thanks to these people.
Yeah, I mean, yes, I would agree. And I think, in his response, he said a lot of things. He said he's not afraid of America. He said that if he was in that meeting, he would have responded differently than Ramaphosa. Number of different things that he said. And I think it's all true, right? He's a firebrand, as they say. Unfortunately, wasn't able to get enough votes to become the president of South Africa. But, he's obviously in parliament, and he is a great orator in a way that he's great at galvanizing people. So I hope to see more from other people around the continent when things like this happen. Yeah. Now, with that, there was a few more stories that we wanted to run through quickly. debunking the some of the facts or the quote unquote facts or false news that came out of the meeting between Ramaphosa and Trump. I know that there's some debunking to be done there. Anything you want to throw out there in terms of some of the issues that they got wrong, Trump got wrong?
Oh, of course, it's gone viral. And we both actually posted a video on this. There was a collaboration we did on that, where they've shown that some of the pictures that were being displayed by Trump were actually from Congo. It was black folks in the photos, right? But you say it's white genocide on South Africans, and then the road that he said people were being unalived on, people were to where Ramaphosa said, "Where is this? Okay, well, I need to look into this." It was just strange to everybody. I don't know if you remember the way Ramaphosa kept looking at the TV. It was just so awkward. But of course, all that has been debunked. Even the man who reportedly owns that area or that land has debunked it. And and this is why I say, regardless of what side you are on politically, if you cannot expect a leader who you root for to come out and be accountable for a mistake he made, for a very dangerous accusation like that he put out for the world and divided the world further. I know I get trolled by racist whites because all whites are racist, but the racist ones, they troll me, and it's quite thrilling. It's like, oh wow, let's go digital warfare, but Joe doesn't have time for those kinds of things. I kind of do a little bit because I have time. But yeah, it's just sad that Trump cannot own it, that he made a mistake. And I didn't think it was funny. I don't know if you saw the video where Ramaphosa found it laughable. Bro, it's not funny. It's not funny. I get the diplomacy. Right. There's nothing funny about how you represented the entire continent on a world stage like that. There's nothing funny about it. I don't know why I was laughing.
Yeah. It's so disappointing. And you see all the business interests Ramaphosa has. You think he's a very smart man, and he just really kind of froze in the moment. In my opinion, I think he's getting applauded for how he handled it. To me, I was like, well, how? Why? To me, it just looked like he froze. He couldn't even. Anyway,
it was given.
So this.
I'm sorry. Oh
yeah, absolutely. Yes. And so the real source says, when you compare the tone and tenor of Malema's words versus with Ramaphosa, it's like night and day. That is exactly right. And I've seen Malema in parliament meetings with Ramaphosa there and all the other people in the parliament. Malema does not hold back ever, ever. He definitely speaks his mind and calls it how he sees it.
Yes.
So yeah, I mean, more to come on that, I'm sure. It's just there was so much going on. Everything is being debunked one by one. And then there was one last story to debunk, and that's with the Ivory Coast. There's been a story going around that the Ivory Coast had an attempted coup just a couple of weeks ago. Do you want to speak to what has been discovered since from a high level?
Yeah. So there were rumors of a coup attempt in Côte d'Ivoire, and that went viral. Matter of fact, somebody had me collaborate on a post on that, and I kicked myself so hard because I knew it was a rumor, because there was no confirmation of it. But a lot of people rejoiced. That one thing I did notice was people were happy to share it, and I didn't see any comment where anybody was concerned. And this goes to the point I made weeks ago about how the military has become a popular form of leadership now among people. People now want the military to overthrow their governments. Isn't that something? And yeah, so some analysts are saying this was just politically convenient, especially because of the public tension ahead of the next election. But it seems like some kind of spark that just fizzled. My big takeaway from it was just how excited people were. That says a lot. People are definitely not happy with Ouattara's government. We've gone into detail on how Ouattara has been ruling Côte d'Ivoire. So people are rejoicing and saying, I hope it comes to my country. Yeah, people were in the comments like, I hope it happens in my country. I'm like, oh my gosh, what is going on? But I understand why people feel that way.
Yeah. And as someone who's lived through a coup attempt myself, just 2 years ago, it is scary, and you don't know what you're going to get by who performs the coup. Is it going to be a revolution? Is it people who want this person in charge? Is it not? You don't know until they're in power, right? And they don't leave. Mm-hmm. And so Sierra Leone's had a couple of coups in its past. Ghana's had a couple. Nigeria's had a couple, right? All around the continent of Africa, they've been coups since the inception of like democracy in its modern form. Since they've all gotten their independence in the 60s and 70s. And so, a coup is a scary thing. And the fact that many people are wishing that upon their countries, as you mentioned, as someone who myself has lived through one, tells you how much people are dissatisfied with the leaders that are in place today, right? Yes. I think that's an obvious sign that, if that's what people are looking for, a version of that to happen in their own country, that tells you that people are dissatisfied. And, you're only getting a couple of choices, and a lot of elections are stolen, et cetera, allegedly stolen. And so I could see why people are opting to want to military rule and to take over, because they feel like who they have in place is just not going to be sufficient for the independence of that particular country. In this case, we're talking about Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, and the future of the country. Okay, so with that, there were a couple of comments that were here that I just wanted to put up on. Keenan Mitchell says, thanks for sharing your insights, perspectives, and research. Very informative. Well, thank you for commentary. Any final thoughts before we close this out, Gloria?
Yeah, and I just want to add to that. Thank you all for always engaging with us. Those comments, yes. I learned from them. I'm sure Joe does too. So thank you for just keeping us engaged. It's so important that, we give platforms such as this one as much support as we can, so that our stories can be told by us and they keep going as far as possible. Like that story about that British man with the essay allegation. Did you hear about the story before you came on today? Exactly. They are suppressing stories like that throughout the world. So we need to keep encouraging platforms like this one to be able to tell those very important stories. That didn't need to be the lead story, but Joe thought it was so important, and he said this has to be the main story. Thank you, Joe. And thank you, everyone.
Absolutely. And yes, thank you guys. And so, and as Gloria mentioned, the way you can do that is by sharing this with others, right? So, you want to share this live stream with others, post the link on your platforms, make sure you you comment in the replay of the video. That all ensures that it gets out to more people. This live stream that we're doing weekly, our goal is to inform as many people as we can. That's really the goal. And really the people who think like us, if other people who don't hear and learn from it, and maybe we bring them to our side, that's great. And this is the side of Pan-Africanism and seeing Africa get back to its rightful place on the world stage. In case you're not clear on what side we mean, right? We're talking about Africa first policies. That's what we're looking at. And so every story is going to be through that lens, right? And about the idea of improving the continent. So with that, I want to say thank you all for watching, and we will see you all next Thursday. Bye, guys.